Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I am your host, Michael Clogs. We're going to hear a press conference from Chrystia Freeland and Anita Anand as they're talking about the state of economy for Canada and the wonderful things that and programs that the Liberal government has put in place to stabilize the economy here in Canada and what the continued work that they're going to do to ensure that Canada has a stable economy. So why don't we do this at this point? Why don't we listen to what the ministers and is in the press, actually the press questions are to the ministers, and hear what they actually have to say, and then we'll come back for some final thoughts about affordability in Canada.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's press conference. I'm Stephanie Levitz with the Toronto Star. I'll be moderating today. Thank you to our ministers and the Deputy Prime Minister for being here. I understand you each have short remarks to make with us, and then we'll open the floor to questions. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Ministers.
OK. Bonjour. D'abord, je vais parler d'une série de nouvelles mesures qui visent à garantir que les Canadiens et Canadiennes aient un traitement équitable de la part de leur banque. Ensuite, je vais céder la parole au ministre Champagne qui parlera des mesures que notre gouvernement a mis en place pour stimuler la concurrence dans le secteur de l'épicerie. Et puis, le ministre Anand qui parlera d'examen des dépenses que j'ai annoncées au printemps dans le budget, qu'elle s'efforce maintenant de mener à bien. Avant de commencer, je tiens à aborder brièvement les données concernant l'inflation qui ont été rendues publiques ce matin. Inflation in September was 3.8%, down from 4% in August. The decline in headline inflation was broad-based, including on the price of food. And encouragingly, both of the Bank of Canada's measures of core inflation also eased in September. The trend is in the right direction, and that is good news for Canadians. When it comes to ensuring that Canadians are treated fairly by their banks, we're taking action in 4 ways. First, just over a week ago, I met with the CEOs of Canada's largest banks, and I told them that it is my firm expectation that they abide by our government's mortgage guidelines as published by the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. Our objective is to protect Canadians by ensuring their financial institutions treat them fairly and provide them with the tailored mortgage relief they need, all with the goal of helping Canadians who are today struggling with higher mortgage payments on their principal residence. For Canadians with mortgages who are stressed and feeling squeezed, I want you to know that you are entitled to options and flexibility from your financial institution. Our government will be closely monitoring compliance with these mortgage rules in the coming weeks. We understand it's a challenging time for Canadians, and we want them to know we are there for them. Second, to make banking more affordable, I have instructed the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada to work on making no and low-cost bank accounts more readily available to more Canadians. Charges can rack up, for example, when it comes to online payments, debit transactions, e-transfers, or digital banking services, which have become central to how so many Canadians make payments and handle their banking today. At my direction today, the Financial Consumer Agency will now work to ensure that a greater number of banks offer enhanced and modernized no and low-cost accounts to a greater number of Canadians. Troisièmement, nous prenons des mesures pour sévir contre les frais indésirables, à commencer par les frais pour les chèques sans provision que les banques peuvent facturer aux Canadiens. Ces frais, qui peuvent s'élever à $50, touchent de façon disproportionnée les Canadiennes et Canadiens les plus vulnérables, parmi lesquels certains vivent d'un chèque de paie à l'autre. Mon ministère déterminera de combien ces frais peuvent être réduits et nous prendrons d'autres mesures dans notre énoncé économique de l'automne pour sévir contre les frais indésirables et injustes. And fourth, in order to ensure Canadians can count on always being treated fairly when dealing with their financial institution, I am designating the Ombudsman for Banking Services and Investments as Canada's single, independent, transparent, not-for-profit external complaints body for the banking sector. For too long, banks have been able to choose who adjudicates complaints from Canadians. Canadians have asked for and deserve better, and with an independent, transparent, and not-for-profit ombudsperson, that is what they will receive. I also want to quickly address the BC government's new legislation to regulate the short-term rental market. This is a positive and important step in the right direction in an area of provincial jurisdiction. We know that short-term rentals through sites like Airbnb and Vrbo mean fewer homes for Canadians to rent and live in full-time, especially in urban and populated areas of our country. That is why our government is actively examining what options and tools exist at the federal level to ensure more short-term rentals are made available as long-term rentals, as permanent homes for Canadians to live in. We'll have more to announce on that in the weeks to come. Thank you very much for your attention, and let me now pass it over to François-Philippe.
Merci, Madame la Vice-Première ministre. Bonjour tout le monde. Good afternoon, everyone. Permettez-moi tout d'abord de dire que les Canadiens continuent d'être préoccupés, et à juste titre, par le coût de la vie et surtout par le prix à l'épicerie. Comme vous le savez, nous travaillons jour après jour pour rendre le coût de la vie plus abordable pour les Canadiens et les Canadiennes. Et alors que nous travaillons pour stabiliser les prix des aliments, je tiens à dire que ce n'est que le début. We need concrete actions from all the actors across the food chain. Already we have seen the dairy farmers recommend that farm gate price of milk stay the same for this year, which is a suggestion which has been backed by the Canadian Federation of Independent Grocers. This is the type of action we want to see and that Canadians need to make sure that we stabilize prices in Canada. Yes, Canadians want to see action in the weeks and months ahead, but they also want a long-term solution to high food prices. And that long-term solution is to have more competition. It's really that simple. More competition means more options, which leads to downward pressure on prices. And competition is exactly what we're working on with Bill C-56, which will give us more tools to make sure Canadians get some long-term relief at the grocery store. This is how we can keep grocers more accountable. How we would do that, Bill C-56 will propose a number of measures that will be amending the Competition Act. First, we want to give more power to the Competition Bureau to investigate when industries are behaving unfairly. It is unacceptable that in 2023, the Bureau is unable to obtain complete and precise data from industry players. Second, en faisant en sorte qu'il soit plus facile de bloquer les fusions qui ne sont pas dans l'intérêt des consommateurs et des travailleurs. Les consommateurs doivent être au cœur des décisions, pas seulement les intérêts commerciaux. By empowering the Bureau to take action against schemes that stifle competition and reduce consumer choice, including situations where, for example, large grocers prevent the competition from setting up their own chain within a certain radius. Putting commercial interest above consumer interest needs to stop. We need to pass this bill as soon as possible, and I call on all my fellow parliamentarians to move quickly so that we can start seeing more competition in Canada. Nous devons adopter le projet de loi C-56 le plus rapidement possible, et j'invite tous mes collègues parlementaires à agir rapidement afin que nous puissions ensemble commencer à avoir plus de concurrence au Canada. I can assure you, when you talk to fellow colleagues around the world, competition is really the way to put more pressure on the market over the mid to long term. And let me be clear, Canadians must be able to put food on the table. Canadians must get competitive prices, and we must increase competition. And for that to happen, we need to see words into actions from the grocers. If we don't see that, and let me repeat, if we don't see that, we are ready to take more action so that we can get more tools in order to have a more competitive market here in Canada. With that, I will be very happy to ask my colleague, Minister Anand.
Okay, hi everyone, bonjour tout le monde. Over the last number of years, our government has worked hard to build a strong economy, which is why Canada maintains a AAA credit rating, the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7, and low unemployment. However, we also know that during this economic time, we are living through high inflation and high interest rates, along with many other challenges that are forcing everyone, including our government, to pivot and refocus. Ce matin, les chiffres sur l'inflation ont été publiés et je ne doute pas que l'opposition vous dira que ces chiffres d'inflation sont le résultat de nos dépenses. On the contrary, just as we did during the pandemic, we have been putting in place programs to support Canadians, bill after bill, law after law. These programs include providing 11 million Canadians with the grocery rebate, 4.2 million Canadians with the workers' benefit, and 6 million Canadians with increased old age security. Another example is during the pandemic, when our small businesses couldn't keep their lights on. We introduced several measures, including the CEBA loan, to help them get through dark times. Now, we continue to support small business owners and their workers, who are the backbone of our economy, through the extension of the CEBA loan repayment program. In other words, unlike the opposition, who vote against initiatives to support Canadians, our government firmly believes in investing in Canadians time after time, because that is how we build a stronger economy and a stronger country. Comme vous l'avez entendu aujourd'hui, nous sommes pleinement engagés à réduire le coût de la vie et nous allons le faire tout en continuant d'investir de façon responsable. Right now, Canadian families and businesses and corporations are all checking their books to see where they can make savings, and the Government of Canada is noted. We are looking for mere cents on the dollar in terms of refocusing spending to prioritize smart governance and prudent fiscal management. To achieve this, I asked ministers to look at any excess spending to find a total of $15 billion over 5 years and $4 billion every year thereafter. I want to be clear. This is not the Harper-era DRAP, and in fact, we have taken key lessons from that experience. For example, we learned that giving flexibility rather than dictating how to allocate savings is more effective. Subjecting micro-agencies to significant cuts is counterproductive, and forcing all savings to come from operating budgets risks program integrity and future funding issues. Every minister has been tasked with re-examining things like outsourcing and executive travel to determine whether there is any waste, and the goal is to refocus that spending towards current priority issues for Canadians, like the clean economy and affordable housing and supports overall for the middle class. Maintenant, les propositions d'économie feront l'objet d'un processus d'examen rigoureux pour s'assurer que les économies du gouvernement sont viables et n'ont pas d'incidence négative sur la prestation de services futurs ou l'intégrité des programmes. We will begin to share the results from this spending review publicly, starting next month with supplementary estimates B, followed by main estimates to be published by March 1st, 2024. Nous allons partager les résultats de cette revue budgétaire pendant le mois de novembre et avant le 1er mars 2024. In this economic time, we must ensure that taxpayer dollars are being used most effectively, and that is the work that we will continue to do. And I will continue to update you on this work. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you,
On
ministers.
est prêt à répondre aux questions.
Wonderful. We've agreed amongst us to make the most time as possible. We know you only have 20 minutes. It'll just be one question per reporter, and that way if we have time for a second round, lightning quick, we'll do it. So I'll start with Kate from CBC.
This is a question for the Deputy Prime Minister. Canada repatriated a woman this year who was married to an infamous ISIS fighter serving multiple life sentences in the U.S. for the deaths of American, British, and Japanese citizens. She's here on a peace bond. Should Canadians be comfortable with this?
Thanks for the question, and I'm going to leave comment on that to the responsible ministers.
You don't have any opinion on whether or not?
I don't have any further information to share about that.
Mylène?
Oui, bonjour, Madame Freeland. Vous dites que vous avez rencontré là, les PDG des grandes banques pour qu'ils suivent les lignes directrices là, concernant les hypothèques. Pourquoi est-ce que vous avez senti besoin de les rencontrer? C'est pas quelque chose qu'ils font déjà? Il y a beaucoup de gens qui ont eu des extensions là, pour leur hypothèque puis des aménagements.
Oui, je le sais. J'ai des rencontres, comme était le pratique des ministres des Finances, toujours au Canada. J'ai une rencontre chaque 6 mois avec les PDG des grandes banques du Canada. Je pense que c'est une bonne pratique qui permet au gouvernement de partager nos expectations des institutions financières et qui permettent les institutions financières de partager avec le gouvernement ce qu'ils voient dans l'économie canadienne, l'économie mondiale. Alors, ce sont des rencontres normales. Dans notre rencontre il y a 10 jours, nous avons discuté beaucoup la situation des Canadiens et Canadiennes, de monsieur et madame tout le monde. Et j'ai souligné que l'inquiétude que notre gouvernement a vers les gens qui ont des hypothèques pour leur maison principale. On sait en tant que député des circonscriptions que c'est un moment difficile pour beaucoup des Canadiens qui ont des hypothèques avec les taux d'intérêt élevés. Et pour moi, c'était important de soulever cette situation humaine dans la conversation avec les institutions financières et de souligner que pour notre gouvernement, la priorité, c'est la vie des gens. La priorité, c'est de s'assurer que les banques seront souples, que les banques seront à l'écoute aux questions, aux demandes, aux difficultés que les Canadiens et les Canadiens ont.
Merci.
Mackenzie Gray, Global.
Et je vais juste peut-être ajouter un détail. On a publié le 5 juillet, alors cet été, ces règles de l'agence. Et les institutions financières sont au courant de ces règles. Et la rencontre que j'ai eue était une opportunité pour moi de souligner l'importance de ces règles.
Hi, Ms. Freeland, Mackenzie with Global News, Mackenzie Gray. A few minutes ago, AFP and AP have reported that the Israeli military has struck a hospital in Gaza. The Gaza Health Ministry is saying 500 people have died. That's now adding to the thousands of people who've died in Gaza. Are you comfortable in the past few days, the actions that the Israeli military have taken in Gaza?
So I'm not going to comment on that specific news report because I'm not familiar with it. We've been focused on the economic issues that we wanted to share with you guys, so I won't comment on that specifically. But I will say the following. The terrorist attacks by Hamas on the state of Israel and the Israeli people were a grave and terrible violation. Canada recognized those attacks as a terrorist attack, and we support the state of Israel and the people of Israel, and we recognize that the state of Israel has the right to defend itself within international law. At the same time, I think it is really important for us to underscore that Hamas is a terrorist organization which does not represent the people of Gaza, that it is very, very important that human life, that civilian life be guarded and preserved, and that international law and the law of war be followed.
Ray?
Oui, bonjour, M. Champagne. Une question concernant l'inflation alimentaire. Vous nous avez dit ce matin, puis encore tout à l'heure, ce n'est que le début de votre travail, mais êtes-vous capable de dire aujourd'hui aux Canadiens à quel moment l'inflation alimentaire va retourner autour du 2 % visé?
Bien, écoutez, c'est un travail, je veux dire, où il y a des étapes à court terme, moyen terme et long terme. À court terme, vous avez vu, on a présenté un plan. D'abord, le fait d'amener les 5 CEO à Ottawa, vous direz, M. Fillon me dit que c'est une première au Canada, parce que c'est une industrie qui n'est pas réglementée. Alors déjà, d'exprimer la frustration de 40 millions de Canadiens et Canadiennes en disant, vous devez faire votre part pour stabiliser les prix au Canada, et on sera là pour s'assurer que vous le faites. Parce que si vous ne le faites pas volontairement, on a été très clair qu'il y aurait des mesures qui seraient prises pour arriver à stabiliser les prix au Canada. Ceci dit, je pense que les gens, vous savez, durant le week-end, je rencontrais des gens un peu partout au Québec et les gens me disaient, tout le monde comprend que on ne peut pas faire de miracle, mais les gens s'attendent à ce qu'on pose des gestes. Et des gestes concrets qui vont aider les gens, parce que les gens comprennent que c'est pas comme quelque chose qu'on peut allumer et éteindre. Stabiliser l'inflation, stabiliser les prix des aliments au Canada, c'est un travail qui va prendre les prochains jours, les prochaines semaines, les prochains mois. On voit des données qui semblent aller dans la bonne direction, mais ceci dit, on va continuer de faire plusieurs choses. D'abord, il y a ce qu'on veut voir des épiciers, c'est-à-dire les engagements qu'ils ont pris. On veut voir les résultats de ça, les actions qu'ils vont prendre. Deuxièmement, comme vous savez, on a parlé du code de conduite dans le domaine de l'alimentation. On a parlé de donner plus d'informations et de s'attaquer à des enjeux qu'on a appelés la réduflation, par exemple, qui touche plusieurs Canadiens et Canadiennes, et de mettre ça en évidence. Et finalement, la concurrence, parce que durant la dernière semaine, je parlais par exemple à un des PDG d'une des grandes chaînes alimentaires en France. Il me disait, M. Champagne, et je pense que c'est d'évidence, quand vous regardez le marché américain, vous regardez le marché britannique, vous regardez le marché français, on a 3 épiciers au Canada qui contrôlent 60 % du marché. Alors, c'est l'évidence même que la meilleure façon de stabiliser les prix de la nourriture au Canada sur le moyen et long terme, c'est d'avoir une loi sur la concurrence qui est plus robuste. C'est exactement ce qu'on demande aux partis d'opposition. On dit, si vous voulez faire quelque chose pour aider les Canadiens et Canadiennes, une chose, les gens vous implorent, là, les gens vous regardent aujourd'hui, ils vous disent, faites une chose, votez pour la loi C-56, ça va donner des outils, je les ai énumérés, par exemple, on a vu quand le Bureau de la concurrence a voulu faire une étude. Imaginez en 2023 que le bureau n'ait pas le pouvoir de demander de l'information aux compagnies, de s'assurer que l'information est donnée pour avoir une étude complète. Deuxièmement, on a, au cours des dernières années, vous avez vu, il y a cette fameuse situation-là qu'on a laissé passer des fusions qui probablement auraient pu être revues si on avait un cadre sur la loi de la concurrence différent. Et finalement, vous avez vu ces pratiques-là qui sont anticompétitifs qu'on a vu, par exemple, dans un centre commercial où aujourd'hui, comme on se parle, on est ici aujourd'hui, il y a des endroits où dans un centre commercial, les baux qui ont été signés ne permettent pas d'avoir de la compétition. Si vous avez un grand épicier, vous ne pouvez pas avoir un épicier indépendant à côté. Ça doit cesser. Et la meilleure façon de donner un coup de main aux Canadiens, aux Canadiennes, présentement, c'est pour les partis d'opposition, d'appuyer ce qu'on a présenté, réformer la loi sur la concurrence, continuer de pousser les grandes chaînes d'alimentation, aller vers le code de conduite pour l'épicerie, puis en même temps donner plus d'informations aux Canadiens et aux Canadiennes, parce qu'on va continuer avec le bureau qu'on a créé, on va continuer de mettre en évidence des pratiques qui sont problématiques, par exemple comme la réduflation, la déqualiflation dont le professeur Charlebois parlait souvent. Mais ce que je peux vous dire, c'est qu'on est au début, mais on va continuer de se battre parce que les gens me disent, écoutez, on comprend que vous ne pouvez pas faire des miracles, mais de grâce, continuez de vous battre pour nous, puis c'est exactement ce qu'on va faire.
Brian Platt.
Hi, Minister Freeland. Brian Platt with Bloomberg. I wanted to ask about the short-term rentals piece. You said you're looking at all tools and options available to the federal government and looking at how to ensure more short-term rentals are made available as long-term. But that seems like something that is pretty squarely up to the provinces. So is there any direct federal tools you're looking at here, tax treatment or mortgage rules, or is this all about putting conditions on federal funding to provinces?
Thanks for the question, and thanks for noticing. I do think the action BC has taken is very important, and you are quite right that this is an area of provincial jurisdiction. But it is so important that we are examining whether there are any tools in the federal jurisdiction that we could use that would make a difference in this space. And the reason we're so focused on it is we really do understand that housing is a very challenging issue for Canadians. And we believe that the core challenge is there just aren't enough homes available for people to buy or for people to rent. And so we're kind of, reviewing the space and we're thinking, what can we do both in the medium term and immediately to relieve some of the pressure? The medium-term measures we've been talking about, lifting the GST on purpose-built rental, which is in Bill C-56 that François-Philippe has been talking about, and I'd like to take this opportunity to encourage all parties to support that measure. It has been, widely supported. In Canada, the fact that we put that on the table, and I think there was a story in the Globe and Mail yesterday saying that people are already seeing more purpose-built rental being built because of that measure. That is a very good thing, but even if people, started building the day after the PM announced it, in London, Ontario, it takes a while for those new apartments to be built. So we are looking around and are saying, what can we do right away that makes more homes available for Canadians? And the short-term rental is one of those spaces. Some estimates that I've seen suggest that in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver alone, you could get up to 30,000 more units available right away for people. So that would make a big difference. And that's why, recognizing, as we do, that this is within provincial jurisdiction, we are taking a very careful look at whether there are any tools in the federal toolbox we could use as well. But if other provinces want to follow BC's lead, that would be great for Canadians too.
Valérie?
Bonjour, Mme Freeland. J'aimerais vous entendre sur ce programme d'assurance médicaments qui vous lie au NPD. Aujourd'hui, il y a le premier ministre Legault, tout comme son ministre Roberge, qui disent si jamais le fédéral va de l'avant avec ça, on veut s'assurer que le Québec a un droit de compensation, un droit de retrait garanti. Est-ce que vous pouvez vous engager aujourd'hui auprès du Québec sur ce programme-là?
Premièrement, notre collègue, le ministre Hollande, travaille sur cet enjeu et on a discuté cela au sein du cabinet aujourd'hui et j'ai beaucoup de confiance, comme nous tous avons, au ministre Hollande de trouver la bonne voie. Concernant le Québec, je pense que notre gouvernement a démontré à plusieurs moments que nous pouvons trouver les bonnes solutions pour le Canada et pour le Québec. On l'a fait avec les garderies de petite enfance. On a juste conclu une entente concernant le logement. J'échange très souvent avec le ministre Girard tous les enjeux fédéral provincial. François-Philippe est ici avec moi. On a fait un grand investissement en Northvolt, un investissement fédéral provincial. Je sais que le Premier ministre Legault est très fier de ça. Il dit que c'est le plus grand investissement dans l'histoire du Québec. C'est ça, mais le plus grand investisseur dans cet investissement, c'est le fédéral. Alors, le fédéral, nous comprenons l'importance de travailler avec le Québec et je pense que nous avons démontré que dans chaque enjeu, on est capable de le faire. Et on va continuer de le faire.
Tout à fait. Tout à fait.
Greg Quinn?
Good afternoon. Mr. Freeland, at IMF meetings last week, you were there, and staff economists urged central banks to make sure they don't lower interest rates too soon to make sure stubborn inflation doesn't take hold. Is that global backdrop going to make your own domestic commitments more difficult when it comes to, setting conditions for lower borrowing costs for families or even maintaining fiscal responsibility?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I was hoping someone would ask about the IMF World Bank meetings, and I'll tell you guys why. Because in the IMF World Economic Outlook that was published last Tuesday, I hope that every financial and economic journalist will turn to page 132, which I actually carry it in my notebook with me, and I look at it a few times every day, because that is the comparative table of the debt and deficit positions of the major industrialized economies. Not published by the Government of Canada. This is published by the IMF. And when you look at that table, as I hope you will all do as soon as this press conference is over, I think you will see that Canada is the leader of the pack. Certainly the leader of the pack of the G7 by a long way. And I emphasize that because, as Anita was saying, we recognize that fiscal responsibility is important for Canadians. I think culturally, it's something we care about maybe more than people in other countries. And looking at that table, I think should provide some very important reassurance to Canadians that we are in a good place. Now, as to your question, look, my own view, which François-Philippe and Anita have been talking about, from different aspects, is these are tough times for Canadians. They are tough times in the lives of Canadians. And, when we go home to our ridings, what do we hear is challenging for Canadians? And I think all of us hear versions of the same thing, that things cost a lot, so prices are a concern for people. And the impact of interest rates, which regular Canadians feel most through their mortgages, is the other big pressure. And that's why I spoke about action that we are taking to ensure that Canadians are treated fairly, that banks, financial institutions put all the right options on the table for them and don't take advantage of them. So I think those are the two pressures: prices, mortgages. Our government recognizes 100% the independence of the Bank of Canada. That is foundational for the strength of Canada's economy. It's foundational for our AAA rating. What we also recognize is what we need to do as a federal government is use all the tools in our toolbox to help stabilize prices, because we know that once prices are stabilized, then that will create the conditions that allow the Bank of Canada to move from the current position of interest rates, which are intentionally contractionary, to a more neutral position. So that's really our focus. Yeah, go ahead, Anita, yeah.
So in my previous life, before becoming a member of Parliament, I taught corporate and securities law for about 25 years and did a lot of work relating to the ombudsman for banking services and investment that Chrystia spoke about today. And I want to say that what she announced relating to the work of OBSI going forward is significant, because now OBSI is going to have an additional purpose and role relating to affordability issues that are at the very heart of our economy and families' way of coping in these economic times. And so I'm very pleased to see additional roles and responsibilities being given to OBSI at this time. As an independent and impartial body that will be able to examine affordability issues that are affecting the middle class and Canadians generally, so that we can have another voice speaking on their behalf.
We're just about out of time, so this has to be our last question. Michel Saba, le Presse canadienne.
Oui, bonjour Madame Freeland. Une petite question rapide sur l'imposition des géants du web. Aurez-vous du nouveau à annoncer sur ce sujet dans la mise à jour économique qui s'en vient?
Merci pour la question. Et on l'a discuté avec nos homologues à l'international pendant la réunion du Fonds international monétaire et Banque mondiale. La position du Canada n'a pas changé. En même temps, on continue d'avoir des constructives conversations avec les États-Unis, avec la secrétaire du Trésor des États-Unis, Madame Yellen, et son équipe. Pour le Canada, pour nous, on préfère de trouver une solution avec nos voisins et on continue de travailler sur ça. Mais notre position n'a pas changé.
That concludes today's
Merci
press
tout le monde.
conference. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
merci beaucoup.
Voilà la période des questions. Next stop.
Okay, final thoughts. Let's get real. One, we don't actually know what is the measuring stick that the government is using to determine what is affordable and what is not affordable. When we consider that where our studio is in Surrey, BC, the GVRD, or the Greater Vancouver District, is listed as one of the most affordable unaffordable places to live in the world. Matter of fact, to narrow it down a little bit further, and I'm going to leave this particular statistic at that. We're in the top 10 of the most unaffordable places to live in the world. That's saying something about the Canadian economy in general, that when we consider that one of the top 10 most unaffordable places in the world exist within the Canadian borders, that's a pretty interesting thought. We keep hearing about we need affordable housing because affordable housing is going to help end the homeless problem. Well, again, what is the measuring stick for affordable? When we consider that the average young person, it may take them almost 15 to 20 years just to save up the down payment for them to be able to buy their first home, which on the average mortgage is a 30-year mortgage. Wow. So you have to be retired before you can make the final payment on your first home that you bought. Kind of interesting. There's a lot of things out there that, with the rates of inflation and fuel and food cost, which, by the way, the raised prices in fuel is actually feeding the higher cost of food, because hey, it's got to get trucked from one place to the other. The farmers need the fuel in order to harvest the crops. So at each and every process where there is a machine involved, there's fuel involved, and that costs more money. So there's a lot going on, and we need to figure it all out. What does affordable mean? What kind of programs is the government really putting in place to make our lives more affordable and maybe even lower some taxes? So, just some thoughts about what is happening with the economy versus inflation and livability, so that we all can put some food in our tummies and have a warm home to live in. Thank you for listening today. You've been listening to Policy and Rights here at Depictions Media Radio. Please find that subscribe button wherever you are, and write letters to your government officials and tell them how unaffordable your life is. If it is unaffordable, let them know. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.